And we're back.
Well, like we just took a commercial break or something.
We did. And now we're back.
Yeah.
It's like the in-between when like the anchors are getting ready. And that's when like they release until the cameras are back on them. Do you ever see those bloopers?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're the best.
Yeah.
But my funny story, right before we were going to do this, Chris said that my voice was too low. And the podcast that we did last
Low
time,
meaning too quiet.
Too quiet.
Not low like you have a deep bass voice or
understood.
a rich, pleasing baritone or something like that.
I mean, I could if I tried.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't think I want to try. That
Good.
just sounds really bad. The reason I laughed is because we know that I'm not like that. I'm very loud. I can be very loud.
That's true. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying it's true that you're...
Because...
volume has never been your problem.
Volume has never been my...
Every so often, our producer just...
He stepped in.
Sneak attack.
That was
stealth. It was a ninja move, and I
actually,
appreciate it very much.
It was amazing.
Yeah. No, I'm on board for it. Okay, sorry. Continue.
So, I mean, I have my history of, like, me being told I'm too loud.
Yep.
Paula, shut up.
Yep.
Keep your voice down.
Yep.
Or, like, in ministry, kids would know where I was based on my laughter.
Yep.
They're like, oh, she's in this part of the building. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I knew that was Paula. I heard her laugh a couple doors down. And then, as of recently, anyways, I started seeing a new therapist, and let's just say our energies match. And so in this, it's like really bad. So there's a close friend who works at this place where I go, and she's just a couple doors down. There are 2 noise machines outside of the door where I meet with my therapist. And she's like, you know, it sounds like you guys are having a party a lot. And I was like, either I'm crying or we're really laughing and we're both loud.
You gotta learn
It's really bad, Father.
You gotta learn the inside voice.
I know, but like she gets going, I get going, and at one point we're just literally cackling for 10 minutes straight. And I'm like, so at this point I'm like, I'm gonna go see my bestie. I can't wait to go see my bestie, even though like she's my therapist. But we get along very, very well.
Well, it's good to have rapport with somebody who's doing that with you. It's good. That's a good thing.
But I can't help but think if I have been disruptive towards other people's sessions because
or just life in the office. I don't know. I'm not pointing an accusing finger.
Oh,
but
wait, that's right. I forgot.
It's a finger that I'm pointing at you.
No, you're totally right.
You know,
because you're having a private conversation with somebody down the hallway, and you have to come to the front desk to be like, "Guys, quiet down."
Yeah.
We're like, "Yeah,
exactly."
Or people
because I can't hear the person in the office who's sitting 2 feet away from me because you guys are cackling down the hall and it's echoing and it's so loud that I can't hear anybody. Yeah, no, that happens.
It's so bad.
Yeah, my door is closed and it's distracting how loud you guys are out there.
I know. Or the people coming in from adoration being like, I'm sorry, you guys have to like stop
shouting at each other.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know how it is that I ended up with a staff that doesn't have an inside voice. Like my entire staff lacks an inside voice.
No, Kim is pretty good.
She can be. But like all of you.
Terry.
All of you get so loud. You just loud, like
a bunch of cackling women.
Yeah.
So funny.
You said it, not me.
I
just
know,
so we're clear.
But you were thinking it. I just wanted
No. I just agreed with the thing that you said out loud. You verbalized it, not me.
It totally is that, though. That's what it is.
And I'm like, did anybody?
The louder that I cackle, the more that I'm going to be understood.
No, but
I'm kidding. No.
There's inside. And there's outside. You know, like you can hear the difference. Right now I'm using more of an outside voice because I'm trying to demonstrate something, but otherwise you use your inside voice.
Yeah.
Like a person.
I mean, I do when I'm meeting with somebody one-on-one and like
sometimes
my tone.
Sometimes.
It depends on where we are in the conversation.
Yep.
And you know, like, oh, this is a serious moment. My voice goes very low.
I want you to start watching the Masters every year. All right?
Okay.
And listen as Jim Nance
the golf
talks.
people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen as he talks about the Masters because he uses an inside voice while he's doing his commentary.
Interesting.
And it's a very different voice than the one that he uses when he's calling a football game.
Oh.
So Jim Nance legendary broadcaster, right? And he
Wow.
commentates and calls different sporting events. But when he's doing the Masters, there's a particular tone of voice that he uses that's very distinct, and even like at different segments of the Masters. So when he's doing the introduction, before the golf has actually begun, he's got one sort of a voice, and then when he's talking about golf and there's actual golf happening, he's using a different voice.
That's impressive.
It's to give you the sense of there's a concentration that needs to happen here, so there's a quiet that's expected, and everything. You could learn a thing.
Okay. I mean,
the other thing
I could.
You can always do like the difference between your typical, let's say, FM radio voice and the NPR voice.
So I need an NPR voice.
Yeah, except that I don't want to call too much attention to NPR, but
no, we don't.
That's all. Whatever. What do you want to talk about today, Paula?
Well,
because I don't want to just make fun of you for being too loud. That's not fair.
I'm used to it. It's fine. I have, anyways.
It's part of what I appreciate about you.
My being obnoxious.
No, you're not, because it's never about being rude. Like, you're never doing it to make other people uncomfortable. Yeah.
And then I lose sight of where I am sometimes.
There's an exuberance and a joy, and that's all it is. So it's not like, I know people who are loud because they're rude.
It's true.
Right. I've had those encounters where this person is talking way too loudly because they have no consideration for other people.
Yeah. You know what?
You have nothing but consideration for other people.
Sometimes. I'm kidding. I'd like to think a lot more of the times.
Yeah.
But I will say, when you meet another person who's louder than you, that's an experience. That's like, whoo, I'm small. You're like, I can't be like that. That's a little too much.
You have to know how to like turn the loud on and off.
Yes. Yeah.
Like when I need it, I can be really loud.
Oh yeah. When I have to get doing high school.
Yeah.
All right, kids, and attention.
Exactly. Exactly. So there's like time and place and just learning how to balance it. It's all good.
It's time and place.
All right. Tell me things.
All right. I guess we're talking about church politics.
No, I don't want to talk about church politics. I don't want to do that. No.
All right. We're not going to talk about church politics.
What level of church politics?
Let's say it in such a general way that it's like, man is a political animal. That's how general I'm going to go.
Wow. Okay. So really high level. Yeah. No, I don't want to talk about that.
No.
I don't want to do that today.
No. Okay. That's fine. Well, what do you want to talk about? You asked me last time. I think I've given information for like the last couple
It's so much more fun when you just like have to talk about something. It's so much fun.
Me?
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know what to do.
Well, that's okay. I'll tell you something that happened. Okay. And this was something that kind of, I guess it spoke to me just kind of about the whole idea of what we're trying to do with evangelizing catechesis. So by evangelizing catechesis, of course, we mean not only teaching the content of the faith, but also helping people to step into a relationship with God.
This is great. I can't wait to talk about it. Actually, that was another thing I wanted to chat about, so let's go.
Okay. So this year I'm doing a class for our confirmation kids, and it's a small group. We're kind of experimenting to see how it goes, and I do virtually no lesson planning. I have given them a syllabus with reading assignments from the UCAT, so the Youth Catechism, and they read those, and then the idea is that they can ask me questions about all kinds of stuff. What do you want to know about? What kinds of things really jump out at you? What are the things that are on your mind and your heart? Because they're living in this world that so often says things that's different than what the church would teach. Right. But they don't always, in your typical catechetical setting, or even by reading something that presents the content of the Catholic faith, they don't necessarily get the practical application of this or that thing. Yeah. So we've been going pretty strongly. They have lots of questions. One thing that I have to work with them on and train them on is how to ask a question and wait for the answer to be given before they jump to the next question. Because what I'm noticing is they have lots of questions, and very good questions, But once they've asked that very good question, somebody else goes, oh, that reminds me of a really good question that I have that's related to the question that they just asked. So now let me ask that question before even one half of a sentence has been uttered to answer the first question. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of fun. Anyway, yesterday I took my class to the church to do a little church tour. And I was very impressed by the things that they figured out, the things that they understood right away, and also very impressed by the things that they wanted to know about. One of the questions was about the votive candles. Statue of the Blessed Mother, St. Joseph, St. Pius X, little candles that you can light there. What are we doing there? And I want to come back to this with them next week because I thought the question was so important. But more than one of the kids was asking about what does it mean when you light the candle, and so explaining how the candle symbolizes our prayer continuing and how we can ask God for anything. Mm-hmm. And part of the question then was, but what if what you're asking for is greedy or selfish, or you shouldn't be doing that? Mm-hmm. And again, these are kids in 6th grade, and so they're right at this beautiful moment in their life where they're starting to think a little bit more globally. Mm-hmm. They're starting to think outside of themselves, which is really good, but they're still very black and white about what's good or bad and what the rules are. Yeah. So it's kind of a perfect time. It's really fantastic. Cool. Yeah. So the first thought that they had was, what if you're asking for something greedy? So, well, what do you think? And they said, then you shouldn't ask it. Like, should not. It's bad to ask that. And one of the kids actually said, is God going to be mad at me if I ask for something that's selfish or that's greedy? And I thought that was a really beautiful thought. Is God mad at me because I asked for something? I said, so the very fact that you want to ask God for something, and then you're thinking, maybe that's greedy, maybe that's selfish. What's that tell you about what's going on? What I wanted them to get to, and I don't know if they did, I hope they did, but what I wanted them to get to is the very fact that they were able to think, maybe this is greedy or selfish, maybe this isn't something that I should ask for, was a way that they were actually cooperating with a grace that God was giving them. That by the very fact that they could say, I have this thing that I want to ask God for, that I want to pray about, they could see, maybe I shouldn't ask for that, or maybe I don't need that. Right. And that, in fact, God right there was already starting to answer the prayer by helping them to see, maybe you don't really need this. Yeah. And I thought, this is so cool. It's so much fun. But then the other great thing that I loved was they just kind of understood the things that I was telling them about. So I was explaining about genuflecting. I mean, they got that, no problem. Then I explained about the sanctuary in the church and how you only come into the sanctuary if you have a purpose for being there. The sanctuary is not something that we just like walk across for no reason. Right. You enter the sanctuary with the purpose of doing something liturgical or taking care of the sanctuary space itself. So you're either preparing for the Mass, serving, doing something in the context of the liturgy, or you're taking care of that space outside of the context of the liturgy. Right. And I had taken them over previously. I had taken them over to the statue of the Blessed Mother and St. Joseph. And one of the kids like, wait, Father, so I know you said that the sanctuary, like we should only be in there. Well, there's this connecting doorway between where the statue of the Blessed Mother and St. Joseph is and the sanctuary. And he wanted to get a better look at the tabernacle candle. He's like, so I leaned over there and to look, is that okay? I'm like, it's okay. but they understood that this is a holy space that needs to be treated differently. Yeah. Okay, I'm really proud of this. This is excellent. But what I'm seeing is like the kids having that freedom to be able to ask their questions is drawing out some really important ones. The other thing that really struck me was that over the course of our time, we were about 45 minutes in, and I realized that they easily could have done another 45 minutes in the church with questions. There was so much that they wanted to know about that we didn't get to. Yeah. So much. It was great.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. My goodness.
Oh, so I'm waiting for this thing to come.
What thing?
It's a cricket.
Like what people do to design stuff?
No.
Oh.
Like a cricket. It was a tool the nuns used to use to tell the kids when to sit, stand, and kneel in the church. Like when they would bring the kids over from like the Catholic school, and it was a way that in total silence they could just click, and it would make this noise. No way. And then the U.S. Army used them during World War II as like an indicator. So every soldier had one, and that way, if they thought there was somebody else there, they could click it, and there'd be a response click. And so anyway, so I ordered one for myself so that I can use
you
it.
Can start using it
Because what I want to do is bring them into the adoration chapel. But in the adoration chapel, we've got people in there,
right?
And so I want to start them with just a few minutes.
Yeah.
But there's going to be prep time where we talk about what we're doing,
yeah,
how to go in there, how to pray, and then I'm going to challenge them to some time in the chapel to see how long they can go.
Yeah.
And then I'll use the cricket to indicate when it's time to leave.
That's really
so
cool.
they don't have to say anything. And
Yeah.
I'll just make the noise and then look it up and genuflect and
That's
be on their way.
awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very excited about the cricket. I'm very excited about the cricket.
I'm going to look this up.
That might be the oldest school thing about me right now is that I got a cricket.
At the moment.
At the moment. At the moment. I say that wearing a cassock, right? But
you guys wear it out of comfort. I'm kidding.
No, I'm wearing sweatpants under this. I'm
That's
so comfortable right now.
Exactly.
I am so comfortable.
Exactly.
Anybody who thinks that the cassock is a sign of something else, no, like it gives me
literally
in the summertime I can wear shorts.
Ever since you said that, I'm like, nah, these guys are just comfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to walk around in sweatpants too.
Are you kidding? Look, it's the thing that makes me most envious of the CFRs.
They're so relaxed.
Because they're so relaxed. But why are they so relaxed? Well, because they
wear hoodies and sweats all day.
And they haven't worn a belt in 20 years. You know, like these guys don't wear shoes or like real pants. They wear sweatpants. They wear shorts. They got a hoodie on. They can just like throw the hood up whenever they want to and like stay nice and warm. It's like the greatest thing in the world.
It's so nice.
Ah. Well, that was the funny thing. So on sabbatical,
when
I'm out at the ranch, there are a couple of CFRs who ended up coming to visit the ranch also.
Yeah.
So they change out of their habit and they put on stuff that's more appropriate for like riding horses and everything.
Right.
And seeing the CFRs like wearing jeans or a shirt with a collar.
You're like so weird.
What is going on?
It must have been so strange.
This is so weird. Yeah.
That's like when people see you in like regular clothes.
No one's ever seen that.
Sometimes you're walking your dog, you're like, oh my gosh, Father Sam is in civvies. This is so strange.
It is not unusual for people to not recognize me and then do the double take and oh hey, I know who you are. I love it.
No, I think it is great that you dress for comfort.
Yeah, but also for church.
Yeah. Does that mean that you wear sweats when you're celebrating Mass?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, because the cassock is the main
outward
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still have a collar on. Like it's not like
you're not.
It's like I'm in a t-shirt, like sweatpants and a t-shirt, just like hanging out. No, I'm wearing a cassock. It's just that, like, you know, underneath the cassock, I get to wear
especially
something
if it's
that's,
like cold
that's
out.
comfortable. Are you kidding me?
You want to stay warm.
Like right now, as the temperature's starting to change and everything, like the sweatpants are great. It's not super hot. It's not super cold.
No, it's like when people used to wear cloaks back then.
Yeah, it's
They're
great.
like, this is fantastic.
It's great. There's a long tradition actually that priests, when they wore their cassock, would not wear regular trousers. They would wear knickerbockers.
Knickerbockers?
Yeah.
Like long knickerbockers?
Like that's the like pilgrim pants.
Oh.
You know, with like the long socks that come up to your knee.
Yeah.
They would wear those because it was like you wouldn't walk around in those.
That's true.
It was no longer fashionable, and you're not a pilgrim.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't walk around in those. You'd wear the cassock.
Oh, all right. There we go. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
you learn something new every day, Paola.
I mean, I already kind of knew this, but
so the idea of the evangelizing catechesis.
Yeah, the evangelizing.
It's not just about teaching them the content of the faith. It is rather about teaching them both the content of the faith, but also trying to help them to find an encounter with God and a practical way of living out the thing that they're learning, and to understand that the stuff going on in the world around them is actually spoken to by the faith that we profess.
Yes. I think what's beautiful too is, as I'm listening to it, is they have the space to ask the questions.
Yeah.
So like we've been going through Aquinas 101 in one of our adult small groups, and I'll tell you what.
Are you in the group with Father Blatchford?
I'm in a different group because his group got so filled we had to do a second one. So I'm leading that one. And I'm like, well, I don't know a lot about Aquinas, but these Dominicans, they just like, I'm like, are they reading a teleprompter? Are they just saying it because they're
scary version?
They're definitely not reading a teleprompter.
No, they just know it.
They just know it. It is so crazy. That's why these videos are 3 to 5 minutes, because after those minutes, you're like, what did he just say?
Mhm.
Wait. And so we have like this little study guide that we go through right afterwards to understand. And one of the things we were talking, I forgot which one this was. I think it was matter and form or something like that. But it was about how do we get to a place of like knowing God? But first you have like the first part is the apprehension is what he called it. But really it means like, what am I apprehending? What am I grasping on?
Mhm.
Like I have this concept of the form, but I don't know yet what fills it in.
Mhm.
And so like, especially with young kids, when they're asking all these questions, they're trying to apprehend who God is, what is the church, what am I supposed to do in mass, what is this space? And so that's where like that evangelization then comes in, because then it moves from apprehension to judgment, making a judgment about what is actually, oh, this is of God, this is not of God. Then you can lead this into like the moral life. But we have to make space for that, right? Yeah. So like actually them experiencing what is like the church and actually having the space to then ask those inquisitive questions then actually leads them towards making a judgment and then making like a decision, like, to follow Jesus, to actually make him a part of his life. So I'm really glad that of all the stuff that we've learned, I remembered that part. Because that's the first thing that came out was like, oh my gosh, like Aquinas says, like, these are the three ways, like apprehension, judgment, and then like really committing to making a decision to know how to move forward with what is good. And so it's just, I think when you have conversations with other people who are older, let's say they didn't have that space to ask those questions, right? Like the kid is like, is God gonna get mad at me for asking this? And it's like, well, that's actually a lot of people will say that. Can I actually ask this of God? Can I actually bring these things up, or is he going to get upset, or I'm not allowed to have these questions? Meanwhile, you have like this church tradition that actually invites you to ask questions, makes the space to have this kind of rhetoric, and falsely to then believe that, well, we're not allowed to ask these kind of questions. We can't like actually, we can't ascend to try to understand these things. So we just got to leave it.
Right.
And then it just kind of get warps in to some other version of it.
It's where there's a confusion about the difference between definitive teaching. So the church teaches definitively about a whole number of different things. And so there's no question about the answer.
Right.
But the fact that you have the question doesn't mean that there's not a definitive answer.
Yes.
And the fact that you have the question doesn't mean there's not anything wrong with it. It just, we can say both at the same time. It is perfectly fine, reasonable, and healthy for you to have questions about this thing about God. The church has a definitive answer about it.
Yes.
And so there's, both things are true at the same time. You have a question and there is an answer.
Yeah.
Further, we can say, you have a question, the church has a definitive answer. Do you understand what the definitive answer that the church gives is? And you might say, I don't understand the answer. There's an explanation that we can give. There's a way that we can come to understand that. Asking so that you can understand is okay. But sometimes the thought is, if there's a definitive answer, that means that once that definitive answer has been given, there's no discussion.
Right.
That's not what a definitive answer means in this context.
Right.
Now, it might mean there is no further debate. Like this is a settled question. But it doesn't mean that you can't ask about the reasoning. What is the reasoning that gets us to this answer?
Right.
That gets us to this thing.
Exactly.
This actually came up at my barbershop.
Oh.
I had this happen
Nice.
recently. Yeah. No, I think that Reggie tells them when I'm coming. The other guys in the shop now are anticipating me showing up.
Okay.
And they gear up with their questions. And
That's
so
awesome.
it's fun because two of them are non-practicing Catholics. Like we're brought up with something at church.
Right.
And then there's one who's a lapsed Jehovah's Witness, is the way that I've described him.
Very interesting.
I used that actually when I was there.
I'd be really happy to celebrate birthdays.
Well, one of the guys asked a question, and before I could even get to the answer, the non-practicing Catholic started to come in with a follow-up question, to which the lapsed Jehovah's Witness quoted scripture correctly to answer the question that this other guy was. I said, hey, the lapsed Jehovah's Witness knows scripture better than you. What's going on? So there's a lot of fun there. But this guy sat down. He's like, all right, Father, tell me about this. And he brought up a question. I said, well, before we can answer that question, we've got to understand the two different levels that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, there's the moral question that's coming up. But then, even before we get to the moral question, we have to understand that the answer to the morality question that you're asking is actually going to flow out of understanding the anthropology.
Yeah.
So you're asking this question, which is a moral question, but do you understand the anthropology? And he goes, what's that? Mm-hmm. Anthropology is the study of the human person. And so theological anthropology. And so we went back to Genesis, mm-hmm. and we went through the creation story that Adam and Eve are created in the image and likeness of God. We went through all of this stuff about the fundamental nature of man in relationship to God, and that dignity that God gives, and then what God intends for humanity. And then from there we were able to get into, and this is why then the church can say that this kind of behavior is not right behavior, because it's not in keeping with the dignity of the human person that God gave in the beginning. So if you understand the human person, we're going to get to a much better place with understanding the morality. If we don't understand the human person, why bother with anything having to do with morality? Right. And he's sitting there and he's like, so when I was in 8th grade, they just wouldn't let me ask those questions. And he said it just like that. He said, when I was doing confirmation prep, I wasn't allowed to ask those questions. I had those questions, and I wasn't allowed to ask them. And I said, well, if they're not going to let me ask questions, then I'm out. Yeah. And that's why he doesn't practice. I'm like, come on back, buddy.
Yeah. So this actually reminds me. Well, I'll tell you the story since we're already here. The second follow-up conversation.
We're here. The microphones are on, and we might as well do it.
Well, kind of to this point is the initial question is, what are we inviting people into? Mm-hmm. So I had a conversation.
Is that your church politics question?
No,
what are we
not
inviting
necessarily.
people into?
Well, that, you know what, that also is part of it, but we're going to look at it from a different angle.
Okay, good.
It's not have to do with church
thank
politics.
You for that. That's good.
But it's an important question, because if people, this is the whole point of evangelization, like, we are inviting people into something. Yep. We're inviting people into a relationship with Jesus and his church, right? The two aren't separate. And so that they may work out their salvation until, that's the whole point, is to save souls. Mm-hmm. So there was someone I met last week, and raised Catholic. His uncle is a monk in Germany.
Cool.
His parents still go to mass, in a couple towns over. And it was during the end of his first marriage, it was actually really troubling. There was just the hurt of miscarriage, and it just really affected their relationship. And he was trying to really save it and try to be present. He was kind of practicing, but not really. And this is probably around 2010, sometime around that point. And he said he was in his bedroom and he was praying. And I was like, God, I don't know what's going on, but please help me. And he had a powerful encounter with Jesus in his bedroom. And it was really, really changed, and it really transformed him. So he decided that he was going to visit 3 Catholic churches. So he actually ended up trying to now I just had this encounter with Jesus. I just had this powerful experience with the Lord. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to mass. Goes to the first church. Nothing there. That same experience that he had wasn't there. Goes to another Catholic church. Or maybe this one maybe I'll be able to kind of follow up on what I experienced. Nothing there too, so to speak, I guess. Tries another one, a little bit more, but still kind of struggling. And then he found himself at a non-denominational church, and he said, this is what I'm looking for. What I mean by that is, there were people who were ready to receive him with small groups or different opportunities for discipleship and healing. And as I listened to this, and I remember hearing this story from a talk at Seek a long time ago, is when people come to our church, are they aware of what they're being invited into? Now, this happened, 10+ years ago. So it just really made me think about, he had this powerful encounter, and he went to 3 different Catholic churches. Mm-hmm. But how was it in the sense that, where was the space there is with the kids that you have, in that, to actually have those questions and have the space to then dive into that a little bit further? Because just as if it's important when someone has an encounter with Jesus on a retreat, right? Yeah. the follow-up to that experience is way more, like, if not more important than them having had that experience with
Sure.
Jesus, because it's going to fall off.
Right.
They're going to struggle right when they come home from retreat. So it just kind of made me think, and I wanted to bring it up for discussion because it just was, now all these different churches are at different places, but it just,
So I guess I have a question just to clarify.
yeah.
Like, he went to these churches, like, for Mass?
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
So he went to Mass, and he wasn't aware of what was going, like, the maybe the things that would have helped him the most that the churches might have had.
Yeah.
Did he talk to any human, or did he just go in and go to Mass and not, like, actually look for the information? Because one thing that some of those non-denominational churches will do really well is they talk up all the different things that they have going on.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes in a parish setting, a Catholic parish, it can kind of get to it's sort of understood. If you're a parishioner here, you know what we have, and you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
As opposed to the, like, hey, here's what's going on, and also maybe the welcome to guests.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the stuff that we have available for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my skeptical part comes out a little bit to be like, you went to 3 Catholic churches and didn't find anything that you were looking for. Did you talk to somebody, or did you just wait for it to be handed to you? And so that's maybe a little too cynical.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But it's maybe not fair to somebody who's just been through a very difficult time and has had some suffering and is, like, looking for somebody to meet him.
Yeah.
If you're going and you're looking to be met,
Right.
like, I've had this encounter with God in private in my own prayer.
Right.
And now I'm looking for the church to support it. But if you don't say anything to anybody, this actually came up today in a Catholic psych discussion.
Oh, okay.
We were talking about consolation and desolation.
Yeah.
And the way that desolation sometimes, in the spiritual life, desolation becomes that place where you can feel really trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're in desolation. And what does the devil want when you're down? He wants you to turn in on yourself more. He doesn't want you to go looking out. And I was kind of sharing that there was a moment where I was with a friend of mine for a couple of days, and I didn't realize this until much later, that at that time he was in a pretty significant moment of spiritual desolation. Mm-hmm. He didn't tell me about it. Mm-hmm. And I figured that part of the reason that he wasn't quite himself was that he was tired. There had been a lot of traveling going on and everything, and that this was just kind of his moment to break, and so he was quiet and kind of taking it all in. I didn't realize that there was significant spiritual desolation going on in his life, and I didn't know because he didn't tell me, and I didn't think to inquire more deeply. I went with what I thought was what I thought I knew. Right. So it kind of made me want to repent a little bit and say, oh, I should have asked him. I should have kind of called that out of him. And at the same time, he should have said something. Come on, what's wrong with you? I can't read your mind.
Right. And it's totally true.
There's that.
Totally true.
It's the both and. It's not.
It's the both and. It's not either. So I thought about it more in, like, a larger sense.
Yeah, because
like,
this happens all the time to priests. Somebody walks in. Yeah. And you said good morning, and they felt that was too cold, that they weren't warmly greeted because they're angry about something that has nothing to do with that particular priest. Like, we are on the receiving end of this all the time. Like, we got this. I know a priest who asked a man, please take your hat off in church. And the man felt that this priest was being so incredibly unwelcoming, and there's so many bigger issues that the church has to face. How dare you speak to me like that? And you're infringing on my right to freedom of speech. And it was like, no, man, Emily Post says don't wear a hat in church. I'm just asking you to abide by basic etiquette. Like, and also, the reason that this guy had come into the church that day, the priest has no idea about any of that. Like, take it easy. But here's somebody carrying real wounds and real suffering. And that's what we end up sometimes being up against. It plays
a role in that,
too.
So
if somebody has had a particular powerful encounter with God, my question is, did you tell anybody? Or did you just expect that everything was going to fall into your lap? Because if you just expected that everything was going to fall into your lap, hey. Now, if you told somebody, you said, hey, I had this encounter with God, and I want to know what to do with it. And they hemmed and hawed and didn't know how to help or couldn't point you to anything, couldn't offer you any kind of spiritual
Right.
guidance, accompaniment, or advice, then
Right.
that's on that church
Right.
or that priest.
Yeah. But that's an experience a lot of people have.
Sure.
Which is like a big critique of why there needs to be a new evangelization of like Catholic churches, is because we've had so many like that in that space. So that's why, like, bigger picture from this is like, you know, we've been doing a lot of small groups the last 3 years, and how have people grown in their faith, right? Because they've been given the space to, oh, actually, we invite you to ask these questions to try to grasp and understand and chew on it and like actually let it take root in your heart. And it's even somebody on Monday, they were just kind of sharing, like, you know, it's been really nice to actually take part in these different experiences at Pius, where before she was living in Tennessee, there was one Catholic church and a bunch of like other like Protestant. Well, a lot of them were Southern Baptist, so they really had a lot of anti-Catholic rhetoric. She goes, so our community, we were forced to really kind of press into trying to understand our faith and defend it. And so like that was a different kind of bubble we were living in, compared to like up here in New England, where there's a Catholic church on every street. And yet how many of us actually like live out that faith in such a radical way?
It's not even about living it out. It's how many people have actually engaged with the brain that they have. So you end up with one of the biggest flaws of our catechesis for decades now, is that once a kid either graduates from their Catholic high school, or maybe they go to a Catholic university that actually teaches theology, right? Unfortunately, like a lot of people, I've talked to so many parents who are upset because I sent my kids to Catholic school, elementary through high school. I sent them to a good Jesuit university, and they go off to the Jesuit university and they lose their faith.
Well, that was the first mistake.
Well, it was the Jesuit university, right?
That's where you start. If you start off
educated by the Jesuits, I don't mind saying that, you know. But no, you'll get like these people who they went to a Catholic school, but the Catholic university doesn't actually teach theology. I've had so many issues with the idea that even some Catholic high schools do this. Their entry-level religion class is world religions for freshmen. That's the dumbest thing you can possibly do.
Which it should be just about relationship with Jesus,
right,
and prayer.
Right. If you're going to teach, like, you have to have religion and theology should be considered a serious discipline, because it is a serious academic discipline. But you don't do comparative religion to start. Right. Like, if it's a Catholic school, we're going to teach you, because
that's what you do in all the other schools.
Right. We're going to teach you the fundamentals, the foundations of what the Catholic Church teaches, and help you to start engaging that at a different level. What happens a lot is that kids go through their catechesis up through their confirmation. They get confirmed, and then there's never anything after that. So many kids and so many adults, I mean, I talk to couples in marriage prep, and they're being exposed to theological ideas in their marriage prep that they've never heard. They're being exposed to ideas about the church and about God that they've never even considered, because they stopped any kind of formal religious education or catechesis at confirmation. And because there's nothing further, there's nothing additional, there's no bigger stuff, they're feeling like very, very stuck. It's also kind of fun in OCIA, as we're doing. It's now OCIA.
I was going to say, isn't it weird to say it now like that?
We've gotten so used to it. For my whole life, it's been RCIA, but OCIA.
Yeah.
Fine. It's a little semantic nuance, but it's not a bad one.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to it. But the idea that somebody wants to come into the church, and so they come and they start to study, and often they'll bring along a boyfriend or a spouse or a fiance or something like that who's Catholic, who sits with them and goes, I never knew that. And starts to engage and ask questions, and comes to a deeper faith themselves.
Right. Exactly.
There's a beauty in that, because they're starting to engage more and starting to get more involved, and it's fantastic. But like, you grow up, you think differently, you learn how to think. Yeah. And if the only way that you think about your Catholic faith and your relationship with God is the way that you thought when you were in 7th or 8th grade, then something's missing.
Right. And there's a lot of misconceived, like, even there's a lot of misconceived assumptions of like what engagement looks like. And that's really the issue, because to go back to this person, though his uncle was a monk, he was told he's not allowed to read scripture. that it's only meant for those in like the monastery. So he was
Yeah, but who told him that?
his
Like, what idiot told him that? Because I want to kick that guy in the shins.
exactly. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, like, so there are these things that are communicated between different generations that aren't true.
Right.
And that when I heard that, I was like, what the?
There was a TV show.
It's so frustrating because it's like you're like, no,
Yeah.
but we have it. Like the Catholic Church finalized the Bible in 340 AD. Like it's literally the mass. We quote it 50 times.
Yeah.
We quote scripture 50 times.
There was a TV show like in the late 90s, early 2000s, I want to say. I don't think it ever made it past the first season.
Mm-hmm.
It was like one of those, like they had the pilot, they had a couple episodes, and then it got canceled.
Mm-hmm.
You know how TV shows go like that, right?
Yeah.
But there was a line in it. The family was Catholic. They had it was a married couple, and the grandfather was living with them. They had kids, and then the priest was a friend of theirs from high school who they had lost contact with, and suddenly he shows up at their parish, and like apparently in high school he dated the mom. the wife in this, so like that was part of the sitcom joke, was like,
Yeah.
how do they navigate this weird thing? And it's all kinds of bizarre. But anyway, there's this
See why this show only lasted a season.
oh yeah, exactly.
You
But
can't go really that far.
I always remember that there was this one scene where the grandfather is sitting there and he's grumpy about something, and like the kid comes home and says that sister so and so told him to do this and he didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And grandfather says nuns are made infallible by God. And his son, the boy's father, says, no, Dad, that's only the Pope, and it's only when he's sitting on the chair of Peter. And I'm like, they just catechized about the church's teaching of infallibility to anybody who happened to watch this show. That's actually pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
But here it was, one generation
Yeah.
with an incorrect idea,
Yes.
passing it on to another generation. And fortunately,
Right.
in that case, there was somebody who could correct it.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. To that point, there's a lot of stuff that's handed on that isn't actually what the church teaches,
Right.
but that kind of has taken on some kind of cultural significance, or
Yes.
somebody thinks that that's the way that it is.
Right.
And you're right. We do have to do a lot of work to kind of undo
unblend that.
Yeah.
Because we do. And so like
Unblend. Way to use the CPI language.
Listen, it
That's
really
great.
is. So that when we have adults in our small groups and they're like, man, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
I didn't know this growing up. Gosh, we got to tell everybody about this. I'm like, as much as it is exciting, it's also like, gosh, like it hurts. It's both for me. Because it's beautiful that you're being awakened to like what the church actually teaches, what you're actually being invited into, and like praise God that you're open to engaging with that, and that you are moving into a deeper relationship with God because of it. But it hurts me at the same time to know like we have received messages that actually aren't what the church communicates. It's like grandma said this, dad said this. Oh, in our community we only do this, and it's like you have all these things that actually get in the way of actually having that encounter with the Holy of Holies.
Mm-hmm.
And unless it's just, so it's unfortunate. So that's that part of evangelization is you have to get through that. You have to like try to get into those muddy waters and actually show them actually this is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
This is the real invitation. So, so it just makes me think again, what is it that we're inviting people into? And we have to acknowledge that, like you said, like a lot of people are coming in with a lot of misconceptions, a lot of hurts as well. And that's who we're getting. But
and how often are the things that they're hurt by, in fact, rooted in the wrong idea that they're carrying?
Totally. Like for me, because my family was so screwed up and messed up, I equated it with the church. Like for me, the church had become like such, because I was so rejectful. No, that's the right way to say
Rejectful is not a word.
Rejectful. That's why I was like, that's not a word. I was trying to make a word and it's not a word. But I because I was so hurt within my own family of origin.
Yeah. And
I myself felt rejected by them.
Mm-hmm.
I ascribed family wounds to what the church is. The church also, almost like unconsciously, the church also wounded me is the leap that I made. But it's
Right.
not that crazy though, because if we're actually, if God created the family to be a way and a means to know him, then I would make that leap. Because if I found within a family, or if I had like begin to have really good relationships with people, and I began to understand that I'm loved and that I'm known, now it opens up the possibility to understanding, oh my gosh, this is the church. The church is this place where it is my home. I am part of a family. I can actually have healing here. There's forgiveness, there's love, there's mercy, there's renewal of life. Like, it's okay if you piss me off, I'm going to learn how to forgive, right? There's like those things become normalized. But when you have, in my space, like, family is one way, and it's really hurtful and harmful and very chaotic, then I'm going to ascribe that to the church. And that's what I did until Jesus found a way through my heart.
Why do you think you put the family stuff on the church? Like, what was there's got to be something that connected. There's even if it's a thread.
Oh, yeah. Well, like, the connection
was
too was just, my mom, I think this was like 10 years old or something. And she was reading to us from the Bible, but she would use the Bible to get us to be obedient. So in other words, one thing she said often was, God has a list of all of your sins and he's going to hold it against you. So you better pay attention and you better be careful with what you do. Because essentially she herself is going to be vindicated because of how poorly we might have reacted. So she used religious language to twist the gospel. She used religious language to twist like the view of who the Father was.
Right.
So that's where like that connection kind of continued. And so you think that I learned, quote unquote, I believe that God was this tyrant, this dictator who is just literally ready to punish you at any moment's notice. That's where it stayed. That's where it continued. He's unapproachable. He is something to be completely feared. So remember in middle school, I was like, well, in that case, I'm going to stop believing in him. Then I don't have to deal with the consequences of it. Because if I don't believe in him, it's really poor. Like,
oh, it's terrible logic.
It's terrible logic at the age of 13.
No, but I'm with you about it. Yeah.
But that's what you're thinking. Like, as long as I don't believe in it, then I can kind of like numb it out.
Right.
Any feelings associated will just be like numbed out.
Yeah, yeah.
So
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I even said at some point to somebody, it's just kind of like the breakdown. Now, it can happen in many different ways, but the breakdown of the family led to a breakdown in faith.
Yeah. Right.
So like there was a part of that. It could also be the jumping point into faith. Right. So, I mean, that was my story way later on.
Yeah.
But initially it was like, well, we're just going to like completely cut everything off.
We don't have time to get into this, but it's actually speaking to the way that on a natural level, by nature, if we are the image and likeness of God, then by nature, our parents are a reflection of God's love and care for us. Like
Catechism, paragraph 21,
is that
36. that there's a whole section on this in the Catechism.
Yeah, that the parent naturally images God to their child. And so a parent who poorly images God to their child by their behavior or whatever, then in that case, then that parent is going to be showing something that is not true. And so it makes sense that someone's image of God would be distorted. And it further makes sense that not only would that image of God be somewhat distorted, but that they would also end up with a distorted understanding of the church.
Yeah.
Right? Because if this person in my family, who is supposed to be the living image of God for me, has behaved in this way or has done this thing to me, then how can I trust the other image of God for me, which is the church?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, we could get into a lot more about that, but no, not now.
No, it's totally fine. I'll end it with this because the rest of that paragraph is actually very beautiful. And it says how
you just have that like ready to go.
I'm pretty sure.
And you're not even doing the catechism in a year with Father Mike Schmitz.
No. How did you know? I don't have time for that.
Just play it on double speed. You won't understand a word he says.
I know I know it's in the 2000s, 2100s, but that paragraph continues and it says that even though that's the case, because God transcends motherhood and fatherhood, he actually is able to, in a way, kind of heal those motherhood and fatherhood wounds that we have. So God himself as Father actually transcends our natural experience of motherhood and fatherhood. And then that's something that's really beautiful. And that's the real invitation to go back to the beginning. Like, we are inviting people into being sons and daughters of the Father. Like, that's what heaven is. That's like a relationship with Jesus, is because he's the face of the Father. So, like, it's all pointing back to God as Father. So, but I'll send it to you. You can put it in the show notes. But it's a really beautiful paragraph. And I've used it often with people who are struggling in relationships with their parents. Like, how do I understand that in the context of, like, my relationship with God? Because the two are very blended.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to understand God as Father when you still have an experience on this end that it's still, like, well, it's still very hurtful on this end.
Yeah.
And try to make sense of it.
The other element to all of that, like, all right, there's the relational piece. We need to make sure that, like, people are able to enter in.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, how important it is for people, like, when they're searching, to say something.
Mm-hmm.
Speak up. Like,
ask your questions.
Part of the beauty of the Catholic Church is that you could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, if this happens, like, you'll hear about on a cruise ship.
Mm-hmm.
A priest gets asked to be a chaplain for a cruise. There's actually cruise liners. I don't do cruises, just so we're clear.
There's some priests who love their cruises.
Yeah, this is not a thing for me. No,
you
no,
like
thank
fishing in the woods.
Yes, exactly. Please send me into the woods. I don't want to do anything else. But
yeah,
there are cruise lines that will actively recruit Catholic priests to go on board the ship. And they'll say, like, we'll pay for a cabin for you. What we ask is that you offer Mass and that you be available to people once during the week or something. We'll set aside, like, an office for you. So there's, like, a pastoral care office if somebody needs something. And they ask that the priest offers Mass.
Mm-hmm.
And all they do is they put in the ship program that there's Mass offered at this time in this place every day. And there will be a crowd of people who shows up because there's Catholics on board the ship and they want to go to Mass.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is say, there's going to be Mass, and Catholics show up. So, like, for a lot of priests, like, it's the easiest thing in the world. If a new parish is established, here's the new parish. This is when this is the times that we're going to have Mass, and people just show up.
Yeah. Like,
it's kind of magic.
Yeah.
They just come because there's now a Catholic parish, and the Catholics go, okay, there's a church over there. I'm going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to a Presbyterian church planter, and so he was up here planting a church, and he's, like, going around and just trying to meet people everywhere he possibly can and introduce himself to them and invite them to do this stuff so that he can get this church started. I'm like, man, we Catholics, we got it easy. It's just like, there's going to be a parish over here. Okay. This is the new parish, and Mass is at this time. We put a sign up, and people show up.
Yeah,
it's true. It's that simple.
It's that simple,
right? But when you're trying to, like, invent a church from the ground up, it's a different story.
That's a different
and so this is where it's one thing to say we're going to have a parish. It's another thing entirely to say we are going to evangelize and bring souls to Christ.
Exactly.
Two separate things.
Yes.
But we want to blend them together a lot more.
Right.
All that said, like, as easy as it is, this is when Masses are and people show up. We don't have the ability to, like, read the minds and souls of the people who are coming in.
Right.
So if somebody's coming in seeking and they want something, like, ask the question, and then we've got to make sure that we're good at being receptive.
Right. What do we have prepared?
Yeah, I have a conversation that's ongoing right now with a family, and they came with pretty significant, complicated pastoral needs, and they want to know, what do we do? And the thing that I think surprised them was I was willing to sit down and talk to them at all.
Yeah.
They weren't expecting that I would, and part of that was going on misconceptions about the church and priests and things like that.
Right.
That I said, sure, let's meet, let's talk about it. They were surprised by that, but at the same time, I realized, like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
They have real needs. I have to talk to them. I can't just go with, here's the answer, because there is a definitive sort of an answer.
Right. But there's a relational component to this.
Right.
And, like, that's, like,
We can actually get to that definitive answer
Right.
by working through the relationship.
Exactly.
But it's far better for them to work through the relationship and ask their questions, because there's a way that they can get to that definitive answer
Right.
that isn't as direct as
Right.
might be easy.
Right.
But it's because they were willing to ask the question.
Mhm.
And that was my thing. Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah.
Because you could have gone with what you think you know
Yeah.
and never asked the question
Right.
and never engaged with me. Thank you for trusting me that you would ask me that at
Right.
all.
Yeah.
And thank you for being open and for like understanding that
Yeah.
I might not be able to give you the answer that you want,
Right.
but I'm willing to meet with you
Right.
to answer your questions.
Mm-hmm.
It might be hard for you. If you're willing to let me have a hard time answering your questions,
So
and if you're willing to like let that be a challenge, then let's do this. Let's work together. It's really beautiful. And I'm so moved by their openness.
It's awesome. So it's both, I would say. Like, it's both like people willing to go out there and just like step outside your comfort zone to go and ask a question.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're actually ready to receive you. I mean, especially here at St. Pius. Like, yes, we love questions. We like meeting with people, like spending time with them so we can actually help you in your relationship with God. Right? So it's like we want to communicate. There is a place for all of those things here. But then, like when it comes to like people's own defenses, like they're scared this happened,
People get defensive.
Do they? It's been so peaceful working in the church.
Always. That's your church politics right there. There you go. Okay, that's good. Way to sneak it in. Just like, that's good.
Oh my gosh. It definitely helps you become a saint.
We hope so.
We'll see it at the end of our days. But yeah, so it's kind of like it's a both and everything. It's both. It's like, in order to have a relationship, it's actually both people.
Yeah.
Like the church wants to have a relationship with you, and we want you to come close. But if we have these things that what is getting in the way to sit with it, like, okay, like, am I willing to ask and seek? Simply by even like moving from curiosity to actively seeking, that's where a lot of people need to make the jump in our churches.
Yeah.
Like don't just sit in the curiosity. Like, hello, curiosity killed the cat. I'm kidding. No, that was such a terrible joke. You rolled your eyes. Okay, backtrack, rewind. We want to move from curiosity over the threshold into active seeking.
Yeah.
So engage. Like, we're here. So clap.
Way to go.
Yeah.
We're like the lamb.
Peace.